Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this special edition of the Resistance Bureau. Today, we are sitting down with human rights researcher and activist Zenaida Machado. She is an expert on Lusophone Africa, as well as a past guest on our program, so we thought she would be an ideal person to speak with regarding the recently concluded elections in Angola. Zenaida, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. How are you feeling?
I am great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Well, as our listeners will know, and as you surely know, on Monday, the ruling MPLA party in Angola was declared the winner of the country's general election, which was held on August 24. This will extend the MPLA's nearly half-century reign of dominance over Angola's political scene, but notably, this was its weakest showing in the 5 elections that have occurred since independence in 1975. And overall, voter turnout was quite low, with just under 46% of registered voters casting their ballots. UNITA, the main opposition movement, has since submitted an objection to the results, alleging that the process was marred by numerous irregularities. So, Zenaida, based on your knowledge and what we know today, sitting here today, does the opposition have valid standing to contest the election results? And if so, how will these issues be resolved in the days ahead? So if you could take us through this process and what those of us, especially on the outside looking in, should really be paying attention to in the coming days.
Thank you so much for that question, Jeffrey. It's a difficult one to answer because none of us have access to data that is different from the one that was announced by the Electoral Commission. Mm-hmm. So we don't have the evidence as independent observers to contest what has been announced. And of course, we also don't have evidence to reject the claims from the opposition. What I can tell you is that if you analyze Angolan politics and Angolan demographics, it's very hard to understand how come somebody who won Luanda can lose the elections. Yeah. Because Luanda has since been the center of everything in Angola. One has to remember that we are talking about a country that had a very long civil war and people left their areas of origin and came to Luanda.
So you're referring to the country's capital, which
Luanda is the country's capital, yes.
Which the opposition won for
the opposition got more votes in Luanda.
Right.
And that is for the first time in history. So that's one question that can raise doubts. How can somebody who got more votes in Luanda lose in the whole country? It kind of suggests that, you mean UNITA was not able to get sympathizers anywhere else in the country? Right. That's very strange. Then the other point that is also could be a source of doubting the results is the crowds that followed the opposition during the election campaign compared to those that followed the ruling party. I mean, by far, the opposition got more supporters following them. By far, the opposition got more social media engagement. But then there also comes a question that we often ask for some of us that have been journalists for many years covering elections, which is, do crowds really mean many voters? Exactly. Because in many places we have seen that parties and political parties drawing a huge number of supporters, young people very excited, but on election day, those young people don't go vote.
Yeah, Zimbabwe might be a great example of that.
Yes, I mean, not just Zimbabwe, we have seen that happening in many other places.
Yeah.
In Mozambique, it happens all the time. Yeah. In South Africa, we see that happening. The other third element that is also important to know that you mentioned is the low turnout. Who are the people that stayed home? Were they ruling party supporters? Were they opposition supporters? Were they undecided voters? So when you have such a low turnout in elections, it becomes even harder for the opposition to win. In places like Malawi, Zambia, where we saw a turnaround and saw opposition coming to power, the turnout was very high.
Yeah.
So the opposition was campaigning and sensitizing people to go out and vote. And people did so, and they eventually got the result that they wanted. Now, having said all of that, I think for the sake of the democracy in Angola, it is important that the Electoral Commission really remains independent and transparent. They have declared João Lourenço the winner, the MPLA the winner, but the margins are very small.
Yeah.
And when you look at other independent surveys and voting counties that have been done together with the one of the Electoral Commission, the other two, there were three results that were announced. I mean, the official ones, the one that opposition claims to have gotten as a result of their own independent counting, and there is another one that is independent done by activists. The two unofficial ones give victory to the opposition. Mm-hmm. So it is important that any type of victory that is given to the ruling party, if they are indeed the winners of these elections, is given in a very transparent and affirmative way, so that we can have the next 5 years of a mandate that is peaceful, stable, and it allows the democracy of Angola to continue to grow and flourish. It's also important that the grievances and the complaints of the opposition are taken serious. If they have evidence that there was some sort of fraud or mismanagement of the process, the independent bodies, the judicial bodies need to take that very serious, and that those grievances must be addressed. Is a right that the opposition has to contest the elections, and it's an obligation that the institutions of Angola have to take them serious and to analyze the evidence that they might produce to show that the elections were or not rigged.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you brought up several interesting points, two of which were the issue of demographics and the youth vote. So, of course, in the lead up to the election, much was made of the fact that over half of Angola's registered voters are under the age of 35. So, in other words, these are citizens who are not alive during Angola's long battle for independence. So, since you brought this up, in your mind, does this fact help explain the waning popularity that we've seen of the MPLA in Luanda and elsewhere, or is it a different set of factors completely?
It definitely explains the results. If you analyze the results of the Angolan elections over the past 3 decades, you will see that the MPLA is losing popularity. Mm-hmm. And I think these latest results, even though it gives them victory, are very alarming for the ruling party and should work as a signal that they cannot continue to get away with bad governance by threatening people with a war if they don't vote for them, by, for example, justifying that they are better leaders because they freed people from the colonialism, because they brought independence. And they cannot also continue to justify bad governance and incompetence by blaming UNITA for the damage it might have caused during the Civil War. And that's because the new generation of voters did not witness any of those events. They were not there when independence took place. They were not there when the war was happening. The new generation of Angolan voters are people who, what they've witnessed is unemployment, a lack of housing, poor quality of education, poor infrastructures, a small group of people connected with the ruling party getting richer and richer by day, including the children of presidents, and the large majority of the youth suffering, living in very poor housing with poor sanitation. That is the new generation of Angola. That's what they have experienced. They have no recollection of the civil war, let alone the colonial war. So that in itself explains why this generation is more likely to vote for the opposition. And in Luanda, where the youth, Luanda, Benguela, for example, where the youth have more access to alternative platforms of information, because that has been also one of the issues with the ruling MPLA, is that over the years, they not only governed Angola wrongly and badly, they also manipulated people by using the public media.
Yeah.
By giving the impression that things are okay, giving the impression that the country is developing, and that those who are complaining are marginals who don't want to see the progress of Angola. We have entered the era where the majority of the youth don't watch public television. They don't need TPA. TPA is the Angolan public television. They don't need RNA, which is the radio station. They see the news on social media. They see the news as their friends tell them. They get the facts before some journalists get it. So they have an alternative way of communicating. They have an alternative way of discussing the matters of the country. And they have an alternative way to judge the ruling party. And I think if we have to analyze how both the ruling party and the opposition use the social media platforms to engage with the youth and to convince them to be on their side, one has to recognize that the opposition did their work very well.
Mm-hmm.
They engaged, they create subgroups, they had the live transmissions, they had discussions, they had debates everywhere, they had analysis, they engaged with the political activists, the youth activists, those youth activists that we kept talking about them over the past years. Jeff, how many times have we discussed that? Those that the president is busy calling them bandits or criminals, you know, and those that were never given a platform to talk about their grievances. In the opposition, they not only found that platform to discuss their grievances, but some of them even found their way to politics. Mm-hmm. So those young people that were for many years seen like a marginal part of the society, in the opposition, they finally found a place to have their voices heard. Mm-hmm. So I'm not surprised that that generation has large part of them chosen to side with the opposition in these elections. And like I said, it should sound as an alarm for the ruling party, because in the next 5 years, in the next election, the new generation will be even less forgiving than the one that is there now.
Yeah. So staying on this theme about the big political shifts that are seeming to happen in Angola, if these election results hold, right, this would mark the first time in Angola's post-colonial history that the ruling party will not hold a 2/3 majority in the National Assembly. And this is really important, right, because it means that the MPLA will no longer be able to amend the constitution on a party line vote, essentially enact laws unilaterally on a whim. So in practice, in your opinion and how you're seeing unfolds, will this stronger representation of the opposition, which includes the presence of several smaller parties in parliament, does this portend perhaps a brighter future for political forms that many activists such as yourself and some of the youth activists you just raised have been calling for decades now? And if so, as a researcher on human rights, what specific reforms do you hope to see enacted in the immediate term? Do you have any hope there?
Yeah, I do, but I also have some fears.
Okay.
Let me start with my fear. My fear is that the the, the events that came together with this election might lead the ruling party, João Lourenço, if their victory is indeed confirmed in court, because the opposition is now going to court to contest the election results. If it's confirmed by the court, my fear is that they might actually tighten the civil space in order to control the narrative, to control freedom of expression, to control how the youth behave. There could be things like crackdown on activism. Some of the gains that we saw happening in Angola over the 5 years. And it's important to note these things. I mean, when we discuss Angola, we need to acknowledge that the past 5 years have been very positive for the civil space in Angola. People have been, despite the few incidents that we did mark, but I think in largely, the people are now able to go out and express themselves more than it used to be in the past. Mm-hmm. And my fear is that those small progress that we see happening over the past 5 years might actually regress, because the ruling party is so scared to lose power that they might use the alternative of shrinking the civil space in order to have more control of the situation. On a positive note, and if we want to look at being hopeful, I do think that João Lourenço has the option of being more progressive, more transparent, more engaging with the youth. I think he should humble himself and learn from the opposition. What did the opposition do right to be able to get so many youth on their side? And engage in a very productive and effective dialogue with the youth that will eventually produce results that benefit the majority of Angolans. And when I say effective dialogue, I'm talking about something that is truly serious, not a Photoshop for the rest of the world to see, or to make headlines that the president is having a dialogue with the youth. Yeah. It should be more than that. It's to have a dialogue, listen, and deliver on what these people are asking. After all, what they're asking is nothing special. They just want jobs. They want opportunities. They want to have a proper house. They want to go to hospital and get the proper treatment. Those are basic human rights that are in the constitution of Angola. So it's not a favor, you know. It's not like the president has to now come up with a special arrangement to justify delivering on that. He has to. It's an obligation.
It's not being imposed by the outside, right? These are obligations.
No, those are public issues. Those are basic issues. And one has to admit that large majority of the youth in Angola don't have a job, don't have a source of income. They can't even think about starting their own families because they can't even earn money to pay rent and then go and marry somebody and then bring the person to the house and start building a family. They can't even think of those things. So as a president, if he's confirmed as the Angolan president, he needs to pay serious attention to this part of the society.
Yeah. Well, to stay on that positive note, I always like to end on a positive note. So one more question, you know, in your initial answer to the latest developments in Angola and some of the developments we're seeing there and the upsurge of voter participation amongst youth and some of the dynamics there, you brought up Malawi and Zambia. So, you know, in light of opposition underdogs ascending to power there over the past several years, do you place the opposition's strong showing in the same category? And perhaps do you see this as part of a larger democratic upswing in Southern Africa? And I ask this too because, you know, just yesterday I was doing an interview with a journalist and they asked me, what do you make of the tatters that democracy is in Africa? And I actually had an optimistic outlook. You know, I pointed to Zambia and Malawi and to, you know, despite some of the concerns you raised in the Angolan context, the really positive, strong showing of the pro-democracy opposition. So do you see a sort of building coalition for democracy in the region? And perhaps does Angola play a part in that? Would love your thoughts on that. And again, to hopefully end on a positive note, but no pressure, of course.
Let me start by saying this to you. We all agree that the election in Angola did not happen on a fair
playing field. Yeah.
Playing field.
Yeah.
I mean, we had the state and radio and television and newspaper campaigning literally for the ruling party. So on that basis alone, and I'm not even talking about the financial and material conditions that the ruling party has to campaign. I mean, the machinery that they have that favors them by all means.
Yeah.
I am thinking that just imagine if these elections had happened in a fair situation where the state TV covers the opposition activities the same way it does with the ruling party.
Yeah.
Where the opposition has the same access to the state platforms as the ruling party has. And mind you, in many places of Angola, the only source of information they have is the state television and radio. So just imagine if the opposition had been able to occupy those spaces and be able to pass their message to the rest of Angolans outside Luanda, those who don't have access to social media. Maybe today we would be telling a different story.
Yeah.
Perhaps we'll be speaking of Angola the same way we spoke of Malawi and Zambia a few months ago.
Yeah. So I lied. I'm going to ask actually one more question, because you raised the point of what would it be like if there was any semblance of an equal playing field. So in order to do that, looking ahead to 2027, right? What role does civil society and human rights activists and researchers such as yourself, what role might you play in that in the next 5 years? And is it possible to sort of tilt the balance a bit, or is that a completely lost cause in the Angolan context?
It's not a lost cause. In fact, that should be where we should all turn our guns to. Two things: access to information, and when I mean access to information, I'm also talking about freedom of expression, and I'm talking also about freedom of the press.
Yeah.
And then the second element is a serious reform on security forces. Angola needs to have a security forces that is non-partisan, that is there to create peace, not to create chaos and violence. So I think that is where civil society should really invest on after these elections. I mean, in ensuring that in the next elections, all the parties that are contesting have access to the platforms that are paid by the state with taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
To broadcast their message in a fair manner. And then perhaps we can see a different situation in 5 years' time. And Jeffrey, I want this to be very clear. It's not just about the opposition having the possibility of seeing a turnaround and becoming in power, because I'm not here to advocate for change of regime. It's also about, if the ruling party remains there, let it be a party that works for everybody.
Yeah.
Because those type of reforms will also force the ruling party to start operating in a society where everything is fairly distributed to everybody. Because I feel that in some of our countries, especially in Southern Africa, the ruling parties, because they bring all this baggage of liberation parties as well, they have been too comfortable, and all that message that they managed to spread and gain our sympathy so we could support them during the colonial war, during the civil wars, has just completely disappeared. They are no longer talking about fairness of distribution of wealth. They are no longer bringing up policies that allow youth to have their first job. They are not, some of them are no longer even considered internships for the youth. I mean, they have, it's like they have completely renegated their responsibilities, their primary responsibility of not only taking care of people, but also to manage the state resources in a proper way. Now, maybe just to end, Jeffrey, the thing I was going to say, building up on your previous answer, is that I'm actually very jealous of Angolans. Because I think Angolan, as a Mozambican, because I think Angolans have done something very well, which is their opposition party has been able to transform itself from a rebel group into zero. If you look at Angolan elections, UNITA went from rebel group, completely disappeared. And then it reformed itself, and it's coming up as a civil political party that has a message to deliver and is able to get the sympathy of the youth voters. Malawi has done that very well. Zambia has done very, very well. South Africa is trying.
Yeah.
But I think countries like Mozambique, Namibia, Tanzania still have a long way to go. And in the particular case of Mozambique, we still have to see the opposition really doing their own internal turnaround before they manage to go for elections and fight at the same level with the ruling party. So I think, regardless of the results of these elections, and again, with no disregard for the complaints of the opposition, one needs to, in a clear mind, to sit down and congratulate the opposition for the good job they have done in engaging the youth. I have never seen Angolan youth so excited and so engaged in an election like I saw this time. And that's something we need to take note of.
Absolutely. Well, you've definitely given me, and I'm sure all of our listeners, a lot to think about. But unfortunately, our time has come to an end. We will, of course, keep in touch with you and follow your excellent work. We really appreciate your time and all that you're doing to highlight these important human rights issues in Angola and Mozambique, and certainly in the broader Southern Africa region. So thank you. We definitely need more like you. And of course, thank you to our audience for tuning in. We hope to keep seeing you here in the future, as we have some excellent full-length Resistance Bureau shows coming up very soon. You can stay in touch with us in the meantime by visiting our website, theresistancebureau.com, and by subscribing on our homepage to receive email newsletters that now include show summaries, participant videos, and suggested follow-up readings so that you can learn more about the issues and activists we spotlight here. On our website, you can also revisit all of our past shows, which are, of course, always free to download in the episode section. And we also have active platforms on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Yes, we have all your bases covered. So thank you again for joining us today. To Zenaida and to our global audience, we are truly, truly grateful. Please stay safe. In the meantime, keep fighting the good fight, and we will see you out there. Thanks so much.